Mississippi. We're the Gulf of America's best-kept secret. Ready to bust loose. Harrison, Hancock, Jackson. Our ports, our passion, our people are set to shine. One team, one shot, one future. Crank it up. Let's unleash it together on SuperTalk Mississippi.
Welcome to the Ricky Matthews Show. As you probably heard, that was a slightly different opening than we normally have, but we'll be using that when we have something to share about this narrative that I'm going to be focused on, which is how do we make the most out of coastal Mississippi? As I've said many times, and since this particular show goes beyond coastal Mississippi, coastal Mississippi is an economic engine for the rest of the state. And for a host of reasons, we have to be focused on how do we continue to strengthen coastal Mississippi. So I wrote a column recently called Coastal Mississippi's Economic Future is Bright with Diversity, and I want to share it with you now. It's no secret that at the foundation of coastal Mississippi's success is gaming, government contracts, and military bases. The casinos in Harrison County and Hancock County rake in over $1.6 billion annually, employing thousands, over 9,000 direct jobs and 1,800 or so tied to the ripple effect. Ingalls Shipbuilding in Pascagoula employs around 11,000, focused on building warships with another 15,000 or so as it relates to the ripple. And then Stennis Space Center has over 5,000 highly paid smart folks testing rockets and so much more at this critically important federal city that is too often out of sight and out of mind, and add another 4,500 jobs that are tied to that ripple. In Gulfport and Biloxi, you've got Keesler Air Force Base and the Naval Construction Battalion Center. We call it the CB base. They together have an impact of over $1 billion here in Mississippi and result in more than 25,000 direct and indirect jobs. Just recently, Bollinger Shipyards snagged a $951 million contract through a federal contract modification to build polar security cutters, America's first heavy icebreakers. You've been hearing a lot about that in the news in a half a century. Once again, proving that shipbuilding has been part of the core since Ingalls was started back in the 1930s. All of this makes for real money and jobs and real jobs. But if we think it's going to be enough to carry us into the future, we're kidding ourselves. We've got all of our eggs in virtually two baskets: gaming and government, and that makes us vulnerable. Gaming has undoubtedly been a golden goose, but we have some experience with but we know from our own experience that we could be one bad hurricane or a shift in tourist tastes or a national recession away from those slot machines going more quiet. Revenue is strong now, but we've seen contraction in the state. Cost of acquiring customers are rising. Casinos took a really catastrophic hit for Hurricane Katrina, but they rebuilt for the most part. During COVID-19 pandemic, they were challenged again. And don't forget, we're competing with other gaming jurisdictions from Las Vegas to the local tribal lands. It's a competitive industry, and we're not the only ones playing at the table. We are seeing markets across the U.S. build strength, and add to that the growth of online betting, and something Mississippi is missing out on. And let me hit something very critical. Coastal Mississippi is holding its own as a regional market. Honestly, we've done really well, but we're up against sharp competition when it comes to the gaming sector. That are leaning hard on online platforms, mobile sports betting, and broader entertainment options. Take Florida, for example. They're jumping on digital trends very rapidly. Meanwhile, Mississippi sports betting is stuck in person in person at casinos, trailing states with mobile access because our legislation's been dragging its feet as it involves this. This puts coastal Mississippi at a real disadvantage when fighting for gambling dollars, especially young bettors who would rather tap on an app than pull a slot lever. Fair warning, we're already slipping. We need to level the playing field with rival states by implementing mobile sports betting as soon as possible. On top of that, We should be expanding the market, building bigger and better casinos and fresh developments that give us an edge and jack up the consumer experience. The big question we've got is, or we should have, is what is it going to take for us on the coast to be a $2 billion market? Ingalls, Bollinger, Stennis lean heavily on military and NASA contracts. There's a lesson to learn from looking at Ingalls' employment history. And it peaked at 27,280 jobs back in 1977, back when Cold War cash was flowing like the Mississippi River. Now it's down to 11,000 or so. Why? Defense budgets shrink, priorities shift, and automation kicks in. Sounds familiar, doesn't it? Stennis is already around 5,000 jobs, but it's tied to federal whims too. One budget cut, we are one council program, and we're scrambling. These aren't technically our dollars. They're Uncle Sam's, and he's a moody dude these days. That is for sure. It took us 17 years to get back to our pre-Katrina peak on jobs, while regional economic development competitors doubled down on growing jobs and wages. As I keep saying, this needs to be a wake-up call that it's time for us to dream bigger while diversifying our economy. We've got 27,000 projected jobs tied to gaming, 26,000 to Ingalls, 9,500 to Stennis, 25,000 jobs tied to military bases, making for 87,500 souls banking on two segments that could falter overnight. But in this moment, we're strong. We're very strong, actually. That's why coastal Mississippi is an economic engine for the state. But we're not as resilient as we should be. How we diversify should be at the forefront of the regional economic development efforts of ours going forward. So what's in play? We've got assets in our ports, our airports, our interstates, rail, beaches, and a skilled workforce. Let's push manufacturing beyond ships. Think high-tech, AI-driven factories and mega sites. I go on from there with the column, and I just want to share with you how I close it. There's much more to learn from Ingalls and Bollinger about the art of the long planning. Consider Bollinger's icebreaker timeline, which is 4 to 5 year journey just to build one ship, with the first in the water 2030. That's not counting the years of dreaming, planning, designing, competing, lobbying, and testing. That's the pace of big wins: slow, steady, and strategic. Monomaniacs on a mission. That's how the regional competitors approach this. Coastal Mississippi challenges to do no different. And so essentially I urge us to think about this, to think about how we can diversify our economy. And there's some real tremendous opportunities. The main thing is we got to get away from the narrative of we survived Katrina and move more toward what is the opportunity for us going forward. And you can see my columns at supertalk.fm under the opinions section, or you can go to the Ricky Matthews Facebook page to read them as well. Okay, I'm going to shift gears now and move over to my friend Ashley Edwards. He's actually the former CEO of the Gulf Coast Business Council, spent a lot of time here, worked for a couple of governors on the recovery effort. He's an entrepreneur these days, working in a number of different states, and he's someone I enjoy spending time with on this show. Ashley, how you doing, my friend?
I'm doing great, Ricky. Thank you for having me today.
So listen, you've been keeping up with what I've been reading, but y'all spent a lot of time thinking about this when you were at the Business Council. There is enormous potential for coastal Mississippi, isn't there?
Absolutely. I mean, coastal Mississippi has always had incredible potential. There are very few places in the country that you can find the unique mix of assets that we have, the quality of life, the geographic location, the weather, which is actually a plus in our column, despite the fact that we deal with tropical threats and things like that, because the more days of sun you have, the more days of higher temperature you have, the more productive your workforce is. And so we have a lot of certainly good things in our column here in coastal Mississippi. And I think that the people that have always worked closely in this realm understand what the potential is. It's just been sometimes difficult to take that next step forward to fully meet that potential.
Hey, listen, the percentages I often quote, I think they're probably pretty close. You can check me on it. 15% of the state's population here, but 25% of its economic activity. So you start to understand that a quarter of the entire state's economic activity happens right here in coastal Mississippi. One of the things that we should be focused on is addressing the vulnerabilities, because when we're down like we were after Katrina, it affects the entire state. So resiliency, strategic resilience, building resiliency, and taking advantage of this tariff situation and all these jobs that are hopefully going to come back to America in this moment, and moving toward advanced manufacturing and mega sites and all of that is a real opportunity for us. Hey, when we come back on the other side, we'll continue our conversation with Ashley Edwards, and we'll get his thoughts about it. But then we're going to shift gears a little bit and just talk about, kind of what we're seeing on the national political, really more really about the administration and what they're doing, less about the politics of it. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizen Bank Studio. We're visiting with Ashley Edwards. He's actually the former CEO of the Business Council, but he's an entrepreneur these days. We didn't. It just the timing was that I wanted to share this column today, and he happened to be here. But the reason he's here is not specific to this column, although he's got his observations about the opportunities for coastal Mississippi. Hey, one of the paragraphs I didn't share, I just want to mention one thing. There was a Christian Science Monitor story that came out last week, and it was in my feed when I was looking at the stock market, and I said, "Oh, that's interesting. I want to click on that." And it said the United States is on the cusp of an automation boom in manufacturing. And one of the things that we talked about with 90,000 factories closing in America, and I wrote about this recently, but with 90,000 factories leaving, that doesn't mean 90,000 factories are coming back. Okay, let's say ultimately, let's say 50,000 left. But the form they left in and the form they landed in places like Taiwan or Vietnam or China or wherever, they landed in what is a pretty high labor, low labor cost scenario. When they come back, they're going to be different. They're going to be more advanced manufacturing. There's going to be, like, for example, this new significant investment that Apple's going to be making. You can bet your bottom dollar it's not going to be heavy labor required. I bet it's going to be tremendous automation, which then means, as you've seen across the South and across the nation, as new manufacturing opens up, what you're seeing is the jobs, the average pay per job. There's less jobs than were there before. But what you're seeing when they did it a different way, but with advanced manufacturing, what you see is less jobs, much higher paying jobs, because the kind of people that they need to maintain this high tech advanced manufacturing is a very skilled worker. And I mean, that's where we're headed. For sure, that's where we're headed, isn't it, Ashley?
Absolutely no question about it whatsoever. I mean, we are in the midst of the next industrial revolution. Historians will look back at the time that we are living in right now, and they will compare it to the Industrial Revolution. We are seeing an evolution of the economy, of the workforce, of technology that's all hitting at one tipping point. The world that we wake up in 2030 is going to look vastly different than the world that we woke up in 2025. And so, really, I think the biggest difference between the Industrial Revolution and the new industrial revolution that we're going through now is the speed at which it's going to occur. And it's really incomprehensible to a lot of folks. But you're absolutely correct about that. I mean, and that worries me, Ricky, because I hear a lot of a lot of the talk that's going on in the media and on cable TV and things like that, talking about what's going to happen with the tariff policies and the reshoring of industries. I certainly believe that reshoring will occur. I think that a lot of this is designed to help spur that, if in fact there's not some sort of negotiation that occurs that stops that from happening. But you are spot on about the fact that the reshoring of these factories, that the factory in China or in Vietnam or in Taiwan is not going to look the same when a new one is built in the United States. It's not going to have the human labor that we currently see with where those factories exist in these very low cost labor markets. And so automation is going to be the rule of the era that we are moving into. There will be fewer people doing people jobs and more automation involved. The demands on the workforce are going to be different. And so we're not unlike any other region of the country in the sense that we have got to deal with this instantaneous evolution. I think the difference that we have is that we don't necessarily have the infrastructure in place, at least locally, to be prepared and to be proactive. We've always been a very reactive type of a place. And I think you contrast that with what you see happening in the state of Mississippi more broadly, where certainly on a state level and on a regional level in other regions, you do see them sort of running ahead of the game to some extent, preparing for this evolution that's going to occur. I know that we've got good people that are thinking about these kind of things, but at least so far, we're not seeing a lot of the evidence of being in a position to be ultra competitive with our competitors in that new environment.
Yeah, one of the things that concerns me, and I've noted it, I've posted about it, is I don't want people in areas of responsibility in this state and leaders on the coast. I don't want them ever to make the excuse that we can't have something because hurricanes come here. I posted something on the Ricky Matthews Facebook page. It shows where hurricanes have hit in history. And along coastal communities of the Gulf of Mexico and all the way up the East Coast, hurricanes hit. Okay. Look what happened in Florida. And you do work in Florida. Florida is on fire right now. When I talked to John Hairston at Hancock Whitney, one of the fastest growing markets in the entire Hancock Whitney system is the Florida Panhandle, where you guys spend a lot of time. I don't want to hear that hurricanes are a problem, because think about this for a minute. We've got the Port of Gulfport. We got the port in Pascagoula. We've got rail. We've got interstate. We're centrally located. And we've got tremendous amounts of land. So if you don't want to go into the northern parts of the southern counties, then go to the next tier up and go into George or to Pearl River County or into Stone County. But the fact is there's great opportunity. If we're not thinking mega site, in other words, we have got this takes a while, as we've learned from Joe Max and the Golden Triangle. It takes a while to put a mega site together. But we have got to get way more aggressive, making the point that we're going to tie all these pieces of infrastructure together in this site, and we're going to make it so you can be competitive. We can't think that way. And it's not a problem. I don't see each of our economic development organizations, which have been on my show multiple times, they're doing good work. But none of them are speaking with one voice on the big stuff. And that's kind of my point. So we're not saying we're going to go do their jobs for them. We need them to collaborate around the big stuff. But we've got to get way more proactive. And part of that proactivity is in how we market ourselves and how we prove by investing tens of millions of dollars, prove that we're going to make it easier for a manufacturing facility to come here that could be a game changer for coastal Mississippi in terms of diversification. We have to be able to do that. And that's why I think some kind of alliance, Coastal Mississippi Economic Alliance, is necessary. And I hope that eventually we can get there.
Well, look, I think you know as well as anybody, you're talking about things that are very difficult to do, and very difficult things require a lot of smart, good, dedicated, committed people having patience and being willing to do what it takes. These things aren't going to happen overnight. There's no question about that. And, but I think part of the problem that we always face in coastal Mississippi, and let me say this, it's not simply from an economic standpoint. I mean, this is an issue across the board. We don't speak with one voice, whether, when it relates to public policy. We don't speak with one voice when it relates to our advocacy goals, advocating for, our regional interest. I mean, we are a unique cultural and historical sort of cultural entity here that has a lot of very small cities and counties that have their own identities and their own leadership structure. There are very few things that have shared governance. The times that we've tried shared governance have been difficult, I think, to put it nicely, because the counties and the cities don't always want to get along. But we have seen a move toward that, and things like Hurricane Katrina. Look, I think if we had been able to take on all of the problems that we faced in the few years after Hurricane Katrina, we would have got all of them done, because there was a willingness to work together, an understanding of how vulnerable we were and how one big event could fundamentally alter the course of our history. But the farther that gets into the rearview mirror, the more difficult it becomes to kind of maintain that that same momentum. And so, these are difficult problems. And there's no question, Ricky, that we do have challenges here that are difficult to overcome. I mean, I hope, for example, that some of the regulatory reform we're seeing at the federal level is going to make development easier. The way that I have seen development get absolutely stonewalled by environmental issues and wetlands issues and things that we deal with to a large degree here on the coast is, it's inexcusable sometimes. But the panhandle of Florida deals with those same things. We're not unique in that regard. And so these things can be overcome, but it takes real work. And of course, if it was easy to do, it would have already been done.
Well, I wrote about it. In coastal Mississippi, 22, if you count the 6 coast counties, 22 political subdivisions, a number of different economic development organizations. Then you have the ports and the airports, multiple ones of these. So if you're someone coming in from the outside, you don't have a point person. You have to, it's, as I've referred to it in a past column, it's a jigsaw puzzle. Listen, it's served us well. Again, 15% of the state's population, 25% of the economic impact of the state. But we can't rest there. Legislators across the state, legislators from coastal Mississippi, we should all be focused on how can we take advantage of what's working so well. And see, my approach would not do away with anything. It would not recharter anything. It would create this new thing that everyone could collaborate on, the economic development, airports, ports, leadership, to focus on the big stuff. And, I think if we had that, in addition to all the other good work that's happening now, I think we would be able to achieve some tremendous goals for coastal Mississippi. I am so confident about it based on the research that I've done and what I've written. When we come back, we'll continue our conversation with Ashley Edwards. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show. I'm visiting with Ashley Edwards. Used to be the CEO for the Gulf Coast Business Council. He's worked for multiple governors. He's an entrepreneur, works in multiple states these days. Just a smart guy. Enjoy just spending time with him. Ashley, just one other quick point. What happens is, as the further we get from Katrina, let's say before Katrina, all these things that we're talking about, the complications of bringing us together, where I was the publisher of the newspaper, I knew it as well as anyone. It was so complicated. What happened when Katrina hit though, is all of those differences went away. And we were and I refer to that as clutter for a second. And maybe after Katrina, I often said this, I didn't say clutter, I said debris. But when we can get our head above the debris, we can actually begin to see our common issues. And that's one of the things that made the recovery effort work so well. I was really honored to write the foreword to Haley's book about it. I think it's a tremendous story about how we came together in that book. But as my friend, the former chairman of the board for Hearst Corporation, God rest his soul, Robert J. Danzig, said that there is a powerful lubrication to change that comes from pain. So there was pain that came from Katrina. It caused us to come together, and we changed, and we were able to have a great recovery effort. But what happens is, as you point out, the further you get away from that, you don't feel the pain. We're not feeling the pain. The pain's there. We're just not looking hard enough. The pain is in a different form. It's in all our eggs are in gaming and government. We're not diversified enough. We're not resilient. And we don't have somebody thinking about it. We don't have somebody thinking about what can we do to be more resilient. That's the thing I'm thinking about, is not just we don't have somebody to think about it. We on top of that, we don't have somebody to act on it. So we've got an opportunity, and we need to look a little harder and be more honest about where we are. And I think we have a tremendous future ahead. And I'm glad that this particular show is going beyond coastal Mississippi, because it will remind people how important the coast is. And I'll say it really loud and clear. So goes the coast. So goes the state of Mississippi. I can't say that loud enough. Anything else you want to say about that before we shift gears?
Well, the first thing that came to mind for me with what you were just saying, and I think it's always important that people across the state remember this. It is often difficult to get any real momentum statewide behind initiatives to help the coast, because people across the rest of the Mississippi, they just sort of do the windshield test. They come down to the coast, They see lots of nice, new, shiny things, big casinos. And so they assume these guys are doing fine. They don't need help. We don't need to focus down there. And that's just fundamentally not true because we are an economic engine, but we can be a more powerful economic engine and we can be a rising tide that lifts all vessels in the state of Mississippi. If the coast does well, to your point, everybody in Mississippi benefits. And so, even though we certainly show very well here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast, people should not mistake that for that we've maximized all that we can do. There is always opportunity to make investment here, both from a financial standpoint and frankly from an intelligence and from an effort standpoint, because we can be and do more here on the Mississippi Gulf Coast.
Well, you look at comparable markets I've mentioned on the show before, places like Savannah. I did a case study on Savannah, and they got the largest automotive manufacturing facility in the history of Georgia. And it worked well there because it was they collaborated with the port within a regional economic development body. And that was a very compelling point. And by the way, Savannah has hurricanes. So you just have to think about how is it that we can organize that can take advantage of everything that's great about this place and just bottle it up in a way that speaks with one voice on the big stuff. I'm just going to continue to hammer that point home because Trump, there's no doubt in my mind that these tariffs will land in two places. First of all, there'll be negotiated scenarios. And as you and I both know, it's more than just the tariffs. It's all the trade barriers that are in place, whether it's currency manipulation or whether it's, tests that they do on certain products that don't allow us to have it, even though maybe they don't have a tariff on that product. We've got it. I think the complication of this is working through each country to understand what is the combination of impediments related to tariffs and the trade barriers. And once they negotiate through those, what we'll end up having is fair trade scenarios. Once we have those fair trade scenarios, though, we're going to have some that we're not able to reach agreement with. But there will be a combination of still doing business outside the country, but a growing number of manufacturing facilities built here. Like I saw where there was a second shift in Tennessee at an auto plant that was going to move outside the country, and they've made the decision to keep it here now. So they're going to keep the second shift here. Then we got capacity that exists in auto manufacturing across the country. You're beginning to see those start to ramp up in a big way. It will be a continuum from we're ready to do it now by adding shifts or literally having to build new facilities. But it's going to happen because I think we've got a president and a team that's working with him that they see the vision too clearly and they're willing to work through what it's going to take to get there. Is that the way you see it?
I think so. I think so. I think that accurately describes it. I mean, there's no question that the diagnosis they've made about what is wrong in global trade is correct. I mean, I don't think that there are a whole lot of people on either side of the aisle or in business or in Wall Street that would disagree fundamentally with that. I think you used the term economic resiliency earlier. And that is going to be very important in the era we're going into because you have all these tipping points happening at once. And this could be a situation where the cure for the disease is going to be worse than the disease itself for a time. It's going to bring pain. I mean, I just don't know how anybody, I think you've got a lot of propaganda out there that says, oh, this is not going to be anything. It's going to be short lived. I don't agree with that at all. As do I imagine the folks in Wall Street and in big business don't agree with it either. Especially considering all this is happening simultaneously with this sort of next industrial revolution, this huge economic evolution that's occurring. The goal is, though, however, to kind of go through this pain and come out in a more sustainable place on the other side. Because I think, as the Trump administration has identified, the way we're going right now is not sustainable. So it's either pain now or continued pain and more pain later. And that's kind of the great experiment we're going through right now. But it's going to be tough for a while this continues to shake out. Undoubtedly, however, seeing investment, worldwide investment, especially from big American companies, come back and be reshored in the United States away from what has happened over the last 30, 40 years, really, can make a huge difference if in fact we see that occur, and if we don't see negotiations here that sort of provide that breathing room for everybody where they don't have the impetus to go and then do that.
Well, listen, you're right. I mean, there's going to be a bumpy road. So it's not going to all be, heaven and bright lights and beauty. But on the other side, unfortunately, with the way media is structured today, too many corporate media, are driven by sort of a global view toward things. And so it's, their view on all of this is the sky is falling and the sky is going to continue to fall. The answer is usually somewhere in the middle. But in this particular case, I definitely think it's still somewhere in the middle, but it's going to lean a little bit more toward Trump if they can stay the course. I had a great debate yesterday, incidentally, about should they have, bit these off one at a time or doing it all at one time the right way to do it. I like the one time. One of the points that they made is that it creates a competitive situation. Countries want to get to the table quickly. They want to be the first. They darn sure don't want to be the last. They don't have to wait in line. But you can't rip the Band-Aid off and get the pain behind you quicker if you don't take a more dramatic approach. But Ashley, when you think about our trade deficit, when you think about what happened to middle America as a result of globalist policies, when you think about our deficit in general, when you start adding all of that up, we weren't talking about that. And the next president, if it would not have been Trump, all they would have done is continue the policies that we've done in the past. And we were headed toward a really bad spot. I mean, I'm just thinking financially. So I'm glad that we're doing it. That's where I am on this. I think it's the right spot. And listen, I'm retired now. I've got some pretty significant investments at risk, and it's painful, but I still believe what we're doing is the right thing. I really do. I think we're going to land in a good spot. We got to get through the turmoil with China because China is a big piece of this pie, and that's not going to be an easy one, is it?
No, it's not. And I think that is where the greatest sort of care is going to have to be taken and sort of balance achieved, because the alternative, if we are too aggressive or if it doesn't go well, is that we push countries all across the world to partner with China, to essentially take the place of the United States. And so I think that is the one point that where so much caution has to be exercised, because you don't want to push it in that direction. But this is one of those things, it's going to take a surgeon's hands, and not just sort of swinging a sledgehammer here to get it right. But if we can get it right, there's huge potential for what that outcome could look like.
It is a crazy world. It's interesting. I talked about it a lot, read a lot about it, tried to understand it. This whole notion of globalist economy. But, in the final analysis, I think the average person in America now is going to be able to articulate it where they maybe couldn't before. And what it means to them is their cities died. When we come back on the other side, we'll come back with our conversation with Ashley Edwards. We'll see you after this break. Welcome back to the Ricky Matthews Show from the Citizens Bank Studio for the final segment, as we're just kind of talking about current events now with my friend Ashley Edwards. He's an entrepreneur doing business all across the South, and worked for a couple of different governors along the way, former CEO for the Gulf Coast Business Council, and just a smart guy, well-read guy. So Ashley, it's been fast and furious. that is for sure. And the thing that you and I were chatting about during the break is that, I would say as a midterms, we're 2 years away from midterms. And so as the midterms get closer, let's hope there's some clarity, because if there's not clarity by, relatively, I say within a year, then it's going to get real complicated from a political point of view, isn't it?
Oh, look, there's no question about it. Politicians' willpower to stay the course lasts as long as they believe that their electoral chances are not in jeopardy. And as soon as they believe, hey, I may not win re-election if I stick to this, you'll see them switching their colors really quickly. And so that is going to be the ultimate question here: is how long will the willpower and the political backing of the voters stay in a situation that allows these things to continue, and really allows, I think, the Trump administration to do what they're trying to do, which is play some hardball here and have more leverage in a negotiation. As long as they are in the driver's seat, they will have the leverage. And frankly, I think the United States wants them to have that kind of leverage. If we are going into a negotiation trying to put our country in a better place going forward, then we want to have as much leverage in our corner as we can have. But as we see prices increase, as we potentially see a recession take over the markets, that could be difficult. And coming on the heels of an election, which I think a lot of people want to cast as a big philosophical change, which I personally believe was more about the price of eggs than about big deep policy initiatives. Coming on the heels of that, it's yet to be seen how much patience the American people is going to have for pain, and how much tolerance they're going to have to see things like prices going up and the value of their 401ks going down. If that can sustain, then we're probably going to have some leverage and maybe come out in a better spot. If that can't sustain, this could get real messy.
It could really get messy, and let's hope it doesn't, for the good of the country. That's kind of my hope. It's been also interesting watching media struggle with this. The media bias continues to be a big part of the story. Some tried to pivot initially, but they haven't stayed pivoted. It's shocking, really, to listen to the bias. But and ratings continue to decline as a result of it. So it'll be interesting to see what happens. You're even seeing that the White House is determining seating positions in press briefings based on influence. So it's going to be very interesting to see who used to be at the front of the room and now who's at the back of the room, but maybe who's not in the room at all. Everything's changing from a media point of view, isn't it?
Oh, I think everything's changing from a media point of view, and I think the American people are having to get used to it. Just something that is not a recipe that we've seen before. I mean, Trump is moving with a level of dispatch in things that is, it is writing a new book in the way that politics is conducted, in the way that public policy is made. We've never seen anybody in the history of this country move at this type of a pace and with this sort of aggressive stance. And so I think everybody is getting used to a new normal to some extent. Trump is not a shy person. I think you're right. He seeks to be a transformational leader. Like with all transformational leader, they want to do big things. They want to challenge people. They want to create discomfort. And he certainly is doing that. I think to your point about the media struggling to deal with this, I was watching cable news last night, and really across a whole lot of the cable news spectrum, they were bringing big business leaders from Fortune 500 companies and hedge funds and Wall Street firms on to sort of echo the discussion about, hey, this is terrible. What are we doing here? And there was one guy, and I'm so sorry I can't call his name. I really wasn't familiar with him, and he made the point here too. He said, look, he said, anybody on Wall Street that tells you they're suffering is absolutely lying to you, because every time we see the numbers and the markets fall like this is their buying opportunity to ride things all the way back up. The people that are going to be affected here are the Main Street folks, the small business people, the resellers that import things from China or Vietnam. I mean, that's where the real pain is going to be felt. Wall Street has yet to have a sustained decade in which they have lost massive profits. That doesn't happen there. So they'll be just fine. I think the question here is, the mom and pop businesses, and frankly, the American people, the folks that have 401ks, it's how long can we sustain this on their behalf? That's the big question.
Well, I'm hoping we can sustain it and that we see tremendous success. That's what I hope. Listen, Ashley, it's been a pleasure to spend some time with you, my friend.
Well, Ricky, always such a pleasure to come and see you, and thank you for having me again today.
It's been great. Listen, have a great day, and we will see you tomorrow.